Willkommen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this lecture. I would like to really promote it to you because this is going to be something very special. We have never done this before. My name is Ksenia Radchenkova. I'm the organizer of the lecture. I will be also your corresponding partner when you are having any questions about the exams, about the lectures or the final works. Always contact me. But most of all, now I would like to welcome you to this lecture, China, Center of Asian International Gravity, because this is one of the first attempts of the University of Graz to bring the specialists working on China and representing different disciplinaries together. What we're trying to do here is to build up a very comprehensive picture of China as it is at the moment and as it developed itself. So we are not gonna just stand on the level of international politics, which is definitely interesting for everyone, but we will be also trying to dig into the history of China. We will be trying to see how philosophy of this country affected it, how different streams of thought were progressing in China and how they affected the modern state of affairs. And most importantly, we will see how modern China is integrated in the international community, how it is connected with the other countries in the region and above the region. So we will be seeing not only the Asian region as such, but we will be also seeing how other countries are right now interplaying, right, with China. So all this will be presented within the course of this lecture, and I will try now to first introduce our today's lecturers, as today is the introduction event and the only live event that we will have. So I just wanted to see you all in person, actually, and hopefully then the other guys who are seeing us online will be also joining later on, so that you're like, feeling really very much motivated to continue. Now, a little bit about me. My name is Ksenia Radchenkova. I'm working here at the REVI, at the Department of Global Governance. And later on, if you want to contact me, here is my email, and this slides you will find in our Moodle. So always at your service. Our second lecturer today, and most important lecturer, will be Joseph Marco, Professor of Comparative Public Law and Political Science, Institute of Public Law and Political Science at the Institute of the Foundations of Law. A little bit about Professor Marco. He has served, Professor Marco. Hi. Professor Marco has served as one of the 3 international judges at the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was appointed by the President of the European Court of Human Rights. He was also a member of the Council of Europe's Advisory Committee of the Council of Ministers established under the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. He has acted as a director of the Institute for Minority Rights at the European Academy of in Bozen. From 2011 till 2016, he served as a dean of the Faculty of Law in Graz. And since July 2016, he has acted as legal advisor to the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General Aspen Eid and Cyprus reunification negotiations. He has published more than 15 books and more than 100 scholarly articles. Professor Marco will give us today the general introduction to the course, and I think this will give you enough of insights to continue with us. But that's not the only main and very interesting lecturer today. Our second guest lecturer today is the Professor Dr. Wanjie Chen. Dr. Chen, waving hi. He's the director of Confucius Institute of Graz, and he is narrating and curating lots of business activities between China and Austria. He is doing active business advisory work. And in case you want to do any business with China, please directly to Director Chen. He will be also presenting economical part of China development for us today, which is definitely one of the most intriguing parts of China rise at the moment. So this is about today's speakers. And after this, I think I just show you a little bit more about myself so that you know why I'm actually doing this, is what I am. Actually, my previous degree, the master's degree, I got in China. So this picture on your left hand, on your right hand, is me graduating with my master's degrees. And I'm continuing research work on China. I'm right now writing my PhD on a comparative constitutional law between China and Russia. So the second picture on your left hand is this year from Fudan University in China, where I was doing my practice. So I'm currently and constantly in there. In case you have any questions about China, also like just being there, whatever, also can address me anytime. Always at your service. And then we are coming to the introduction of the lecture. Okay, so this lecture is composed of 13 meetings. Only the first one is live. From the next week on, we will see each other always in Zoom. There is also like a bigger audience right now already there. Yeah, our last lecture, I believe, is on the 16th of January, right? So we will be going just according to the regular schedule. Important is that, of course, it's just only for your information and for your interest to listen to all the speakers that we will be presenting to you. At the end of this event, there will be no test. We will be just expecting a paper from you, like an essay on any given subject that might have come around during our discussions, right? So anything that is interesting for you, basically, right? It might be politics related, it might be history related, it might be law related. We will be navigating around all these themes, right? But I just would like to see what rings a bell, what is more important for you. Basically, that's it, right? Most of all, we want to bring for you the interdisciplinarity in place, so that you see the different approaches and different disciplines looking at one and the same subject, and then you are free to decide which one is more interesting for you personally. So just wanted you to see now again what lecturers will be presenting to us. The beginning of the cycle of these lectures will be more history related. The next week is a very interesting presentation by Joseph Chadwin about the modern reading of Chinese philosophy and religion. So he will be definitely going through the historical meanings of the religion in China. The week after, I personally will be presenting the concept of sovereignty and the legal tradition in China, which is actually also going majorly through the history of China in its legal aspects. Then we will have Dr. Susanne Weigelen-Schwederzig, who is an outstanding specialist on China. She is one of the best representers when you ask political and legal questions about China, working in Vienna. She will be speaking about China's Wiederaufstieg zur Weltmacht, how China grew up to the world power. After that, we will be talking about the economic developments of China in the 20th century. And then starts the pleiad of the specialists that are coming from far away. So first, Jinxia Shi from Renmin University will be talking about the economic goals of China. Then our local specialist, Benedict Hartzell, will be talking about Asian integration as processes very important at the moment. Then Thomas Elder from Vienna about Russian-China relations, a very hot topic, I believe. And then Ryan Mitchell about Chinese project to transform international law. Walter Li about modern international relations. And then the Chinese specialist Qi Gao, Sina-US technology competition and digital governance. Then Sergei Sayapin, China and Kazakhstan relations. And the very last one, Xi Zheng, the rethinking of Thucydides' trap. As you see, we tried to combine everything. So I hope you will find something that is mostly interesting for you to then draw on your own in your own research. So, and just to finish my part, because we have lots of more to hear, I just wanted to ask why China, right? Why do we talk about this? Because we all know that this is the second largest world economy. We know that the balance of powers in the international world is changing. when we're speaking about war in Ukraine, we see the very firm stance of China, who wants to stay and remain neutral. Very important stance. What is also important? The signing of comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for the new era between Russia and China. Very complicated phrase, but this cooperation of huge two countries means a lot in international law and international politics. Taiwan questions we definitely won't bypass. We will be also talking about Belt and Road Initiative and many, many other topics. And at the end of my part, I wanted to show you just this graph about how China overtook the US as the world's major trade partner. It's interesting to see comparisons once in a while. And I found this graph quite interesting. Now we will see how it goes. It's just an interactive map where you see with the red color how the countries whose biggest trade partner was China. Oh, sorry. Consent was China. Consent. Yes. Okay. And now it will start again. So we will start. One moment. Does it go again? So at the beginning in 2000, in 1980, you see the major partners were marked blue. They were the trade partners of US. And gradually we see how more and more countries started actually developing their trade relationship with China. And then when we come to 2018, we see that right now, like more than half of the world is actually majorly trading with China. So as a trend, I believe it's also quite an important thing not to forget about. So, and with this being presented, I'm coming back to our presentation, right? And I'm giving the floor to Dr. Wanjie Chen, who will continue. So, Dr. Chen, I think you can use this for the slides.
Okay. Thank you for your introduction, because I speak a little bit English, so I try to my lecture in German. Okay, I hope the people in China, they understand me also, because we talk about the Chinese situation. Gut, ich komme in deutschsprachige. Ich bedanke mich für die Einladung. Ich habe limitierte Zeit. In 20 Minuten versuchen diese Entwicklungsrichtung China zu erzählen. Es ist gar nicht so leicht. Ja, China 5000 Jahre Geschichte. Ich werde das auf eine Konzentration holen. Wo geht China hin? So.
Ich werde helfen.
Ja, bitte. Über mich haben Sie gesehen, ich komme von der Praxis. Eine Seite bin ich zuständig für das Konfuzius-Institut an der Universität Graz. Auf anderer Seite bin ich auch Unternehmer. Ich bin ja seit 37 Jahren in Österreich. Das heißt, ich bin ja auch in der Wirtschaftskammer tätig, bin verantwortlich für Außenhändler, über 6.500 Unternehmen in Österreich, macht der wirtschaftliche Beziehung zwischen China und Österreich auf jeden Fall. Ich werde jetzt hineingehen zum nächsten Bild, bitte. Solche Fotos haben Sie sicher in China gesehen. Ich zeige nur solche Fotos, sehr einfach. Geht es darum, ich möchte sagen, China früher, China heute oder China heute, morgen oder Zukunft. Gestern auch dazu. Also sozialistische Marktwirtschaft ist ein Begriff. Das ist sehr, sehr wichtig. Reformpolitik seit 1978. Das heißt, ab 1978 ist sozusagen eine neue China-Zeit. Eine Zeit ganz andere zur Mao Zedong-Zeit. Mao Zedong-Zeit endet bis 1976. Das heißt, die Deng Xiaoping-Zeit, die Zeit seit 1978, spricht man Öffnungspolitik Chinas. Seit diesem Zeitpunkt, China hat sich gigantisch verändert. Ja? Und dann spätere 80 Jahre Zeit kommt der Begriff sozialistische Marktwirtschaft, chinesische Prägung nur dazu. Und was heißt das? Wenn jetzt Bilder zeigen, Dach oben ist chinesisch, Körper ist kapitalistisch, Hochbau. Ja? Das heißt, sozialistische Marktwirtschaft ist eine neue Erfindung, eine Mischung zwischen Kapitalismus und Sozialismus. So, wie versteht man das? Sozialistische Marktwirtschaft, chinesische Prägung. Ich möchte einen Witz erzählen. Professor Marco hat es schon ein paar Mal gehört. Geht es darum, dass die Mischung, welche Richtung fahren wir jetzt? Kapitalistisch oder sozialistisch? So, der Witz lautet es so, das war George W. Bush in China, sehr wurscht. Der fuhr mit der Audi A8 zu einer Kreuzung. George W. Bush hat sofort gewusst, ich fahre nach rechts. Rechts heißt es kapitalistisch. Jetzt kommt der Mr. Putin. Ja, wir reden diese gesamte Sachen über Putin, Russland. Der Putin fährt auch mit den Audi A8 zu einer Kreuzung. Denkt nach links oder rechts. Ja, und doch ist er nach rechts gefallen. Jetzt kommt der frühere chinesische Staatspräsident Jiang Zemin. Ja, das ist nach Deng Xiaoping, der kleine starke Mann ist der Jiang Zemin. Der Jiang Zemin mit dem Audi A8 auch zu einer Kreuzung gekommen. Ihr Denken schafft nach links oder rechts. Traut selber nicht zu entscheiden. Luft Deng Xiaoping an, Autotelefon. Frage Deng Xiaoping, wie mache ich jetzt? Soll ich nach links fahren oder soll ich nach rechts fahren? Darauf hat der Deng Xiaoping ganz kurzbündige geantwortet. Du Dummkopf, blinkst nach links, fahr nach rechts. Sozialistische Marktwirtschaft heißt das. Wenn man heute hineinschaut, dieser Knödel, sozialistischer Kapitalismus, ist es über 70% mehr private Wirtschaft drinnen als öffentliche Besitzer. Das heißt, dieser Knödel wird immer privatisiert. Ja? Privatisiert. Und da zeigt eine Richtung, China geht es mehr rechts, aber Makroebene ist noch immer links, also Richtungen, ja. Sozialistische Marktwirtschaft. Makroebene Kontrolle ist noch immer China zentrale gelegt. Mikroebene gesellschaftlich, rechtliche Ebene, wenn man hinschaut, wenn man in ein GmbH-Gesetz hineinschaut, ja, gibt es nicht viele Unterschiede zwischen GmbH-Gesetz hier und dort. Wenn der Personengesellschaft rechtliche Dinge hineinschaut, ob jetzt KG, ob es KKG, ziemlich gleiche. Das einzige Unterschied ist, in der chinesischen Gesellschaft der Rechte drinnen gibt es dann für Staatsbetriebe auf jeden Fall eine Kammerorganisation, eine Arbeitskammerorganisation. Oder steht eine Partei kleine Zielorganisation. Ja? Das ist was bei unserer westlichen Gesellschaft der Rechte drinnen nichts gibt. Bei GmbH zum Beispiel. Ja? Hier zeigt man das. Das heißt, China geht in eine Richtung, eine Mischung, Makrosozialismus, Mikrokapitalismus, also sozialistische Marktwirtschaft. Das ist eine Tendenzrichtung. Und diese bleibt heute nach wie vor. Ja? Wobei der Privatprozess beschleunigt sich, ja, wird immer mehr und immer mehr. Wenn man heute die Firma hinschaut, private Unternehmen jetzt immer mehr. So, das ist einmal das eine. Unter diese Bilder möchte ich gerne noch in diesen Minuten 3 wesentliche Änderungen, ja, wobei diese Änderung stammte vom frühen Zeit 2021, 2022, Anfangszeit, geht es nur darum, Made in China geht Made by China. Made in China in der Zeit, Reformpolitik, Anfangszeit, die Chinesen sind Kopiemeister auf der Welt. Die kopieren, machen nach, ja. Und heute die Kopiererei fast verschwinden. Ja? Wenn man heute Statistiken hinschaut, 2022, China hat eine gesamte Investition gegeben für Forschung und Entwicklung. Also diese Quote, wenn man mit absoluter Zahl rechnen, mehr als 400 Milliarden Euro. Alleine in diesem Jahr für Forschung und Entwicklung 400 Milliarden Euro investiert hat. Wie viele Hausbudget hatte Österreich pro Jahr? GDP, gesamte Einnahme. Mehr als 400 Milliarden Euro. Also China geht schon jetzt lange weg von Kopiererei, von Made in China, geht es Made by China. Die ganz Lohnintensiv-Betrieb siedelt geht nach Vietnam, lohnbillige Länder. Ja, verlegt das. Der Hightech-Bereich bleibt da. Die guten Unternehmen geht nach Ausland, go out. Wenn man heute Österreich schaut, mehr als 35 chinesische Unternehmen, die bereits bei uns angesiedelt haben. Das sitzen meisten Firmen in Wien, gibt es auch teilweise hier. Aber wenn wir in die verkehrte Richtung schauen, ja, wie schaut die österreichische Investition in China aus? Bis dato mehr als 680 österreichische Unternehmer seit der Reformpolitik 78 bereits in China investiert haben. Mit der über 1000 Niederlassungen in ganz China verstreut. Tendenz zeigt steigend Investition österreichischer Unternehmen nach China, chinesische Unternehmen nach Europa. So, das spricht eine Sache, heißt Made in China, geht's Made by China. Wenn die chinesischen Unternehmen hierher kommen, wenn solche Betriebe anschaut, Huawei, sagt Ihnen was, oder? Hindi, so. Ja, ZTE, sagt Ihnen aus, ja. Es gibt Hightech-Unternehmen, die ganz stark unterwegs bei uns in ganz Europa. Also Made in China, geht's Made by China. Zweiter Punkt ist es ganz, ganz wichtig, dass Chinese Product, chinesische Produkte, jetzt geht es zum chinesischen Marken. Früher sagt, das sind chinesische Produkte, jetzt Chinesen sagen, nein, ich möchte Marken etablieren, als Marken weltweit etablieren. Wenn man jetzt heute hinschaut bei der Photovoltaikindustrie, ja, über 87% die gesamten Systeme, ob jetzt der Paneele geht, Wechselrichter geht, ob jetzt geht um die Batteriespeicherung, ja, ob jetzt geht um Ladestationen, 97% aller Produkte kommen aus China, die EU hineingekommen. Das heißt, die chinesische Marke wird immer wichtiger. Also PV ist ein Beispiel. Gibt es eine berühmte PV-Industrie mit den Marken. Ja, wenn Sie heute Batterie haben willst, es gibt Huawei-Batterie. Huawei nicht nur Handy, ja. Huawei bewegt sich auch in ganz PV-Industrie. Ja, das heißt, da zeigt er eine andere Richtung, chinesische Produkte, geht es um chinesische Markenrichtung, möchte als Marke etablieren international. Unter diesen Marken versteht man das auch, die chinesische Entwicklungsgeschwindigkeit, geht es um die chinesische Qualität. Das heißt, schneller ist vorbei. China sagt, Moment, jetzt muss man langsam machen. Jetzt kommt die Frage nach Qualität. Qualität heißt also nicht nur, das Produkt perfekt herzustellen, Qualität heißt auch vieles mehr. Die müssen auch berücksichtigen, genau was die Umwelt anbelangt, genau was die Kreiswirtschaft anbelangt. Ja, wie schaut der Recycling aus? Wo kriegt der Rohmaterial und so weiter. Also hier sieht man genau, in die Richtungen geht, also statt Geschwindigkeit, Qualität. Diese drei Merkmale sind jetzt neue, sehr, sehr wichtige. Unter diese drei Merkmale sieht man auch China, in welche Richtung ging. Ja, das ist nur allgemeine Bezeichnung, betrifft da eigentlich alle Branchen in ganz China. Ja, so, letztes Bild. Das heißt, wenn man Import, Export schaut, ja, es gibt viele Zahlen. Ich will nicht heute über viele Zahlen reden, aber hier sieht man Importe der EU aus China 2022 plus 20%. So viele Milliarden. Und Export EU nach China plus 9%. Das bedeutet, EU ist der wichtigste Handelspartner Chinas, umgekehrt genauso. Aus diesem Grunde denke ich, diese Ringe-Vorlesung super. Ja? Europa muss mit China zusammenarbeiten. China braucht Europa, EU, Europa braucht auch China. Nur Win-Win schafft beste Situation für alle Parteien hier. Und letztes Bild, ein paar Worte über mein Institut, kleine Werbung. Ja? Konfuzius-Institut hier an der Universität Graz seit 2010 etabliert. Wir bieten verschiedene Niveaus von Chinesisch-Sprachkurs an und wir haben auch Online-Kurs, Offline-Kurs. Bis dato haben wir mehr als 1700 Chinesisch-Sprachlernende bei uns. Wir sind einer der besten Konfuzius-Institute weltweit geworden. Weltweit gibt es 550. Österreich gibt es 2. Ja? Wir sind einer der besten geworden. So, nicht nur Sprache, Kultur austauschen, sondern auch wir sehen uns als eine Plattform zwischen Österreich und China, Europa und China. Geht es um die Zusammenarbeit zwischen wirtschaftlichem Bereich, wissenschaftlichem Bereich, auch juristischen Bereich, Kulturbereich, vieles mehr. Sozusagen, bitte besuchen uns. Wir haben viele Kurse, viele Stipendiumprogramme. Wenn Sie auch teilweise in China studieren möchten, kriegen Money von uns supported. Dankeschön. Das war's.
Danke, Herr Chen. Thank you, Dr. Chen. And I would like to give the microphone to our next speaker, Professor Marco, who will be coming in a minute. And Professor Marco will be making the rest of our thorough introduction for the lecture. Please.
Thank you so much, Xenia. Can you, this is my first slide. Who can read it? Except here. Then I will try to make an overview on the meaning of these Chinese characters over the last over the next few minutes. First of all, what is the goal of these series of lectures? As you could see already from the program, this is an interdisciplinary series of lectures trying to bring together the different academic disciplines of political sciences, comparative law, but also culture, cultural studies, and history. In this respect, I must say that, as you heard before, that I was a judge, an international judge at the Constitutional Court of Bosnia-Herzegovina. It came to my mind, it is so important, also when you go out of Austria to see, well, what importance do languages have? And when I became a judge, it was very important to say at least a few words in the local language. For instance, when you say good morning, dobro jutro, this already can open a door. Or good evening and good night. This will open doors when you show respect to the other country, to the other culture, also by using a few words in the local language. In this sense, when we, for instance, look into the headlines of today's newspaper, so this is Die Presse, today's Die Presse with the headline, Das chinesische Modell wankt. So you have heard from Dr. Wang Jijian, and from Xenia, Chinese is on the rise as a world power. And now the headline, world power, let's wait and see. This is the message from this headline of today's newspapers. There are also economic troubles at the very moment going on in China. And from this perspective, of course, bringing the headlines together with my experience in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I can say, well, there are two lenses to look into other countries, to look into other cultures, and for instance, then also to work in other cultures and countries. On the one hand, I read almost on a daily basis also the Neue Zürcher Zeitung and the comments in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. And when you also read Austrian newspapers, the lens of geopolitics is the main lens to look into international relations. And what does it mean, geopolitics? What is geopolitics all about? It is not cooperation, it is conflict. So you have rivalries between the great powers, in particular now between the United States on the one hand and China on the other hand, and you can hear and read almost daily on this ongoing conflict, and I will come back to that, of course, in the course of my presentation. What I, however, try to pursue as an academic teacher and researcher is not geopolitics. As a trained lawyer in comparative constitutional law and comparative government, also as a political scientist. But what I'm much more interested in is, again, what you can summarize under the topic of cooperation. Why? Because intercultural communication and intercultural dialogue is also very important for our understanding different cultures. When I started my academic career in 1990, making interviews on the situation in Carinthia and the situation of the Slovene minority in Carinthia, I made interviews with politicians from the Freedom Party. And I was very astonished that the two sons of these politicians from the Freedom Party were studying Slovene in high school, not German, Slovene in high school. And I asked him, why? And the answer was by this politician, you must know the language of the enemy. Only then can you successfully fight the enemy if you know each and everything about the enemy. So this is the position, the approach of geopolitics. Intercultural community in communication and intercultural understanding will say, well, first and above all, and this is also my lesson here, my message, what I learned from experience in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in the Balkans, and in other countries of the world like the US, is we must have respect for the other, and showing respect means that you need some sort of an inner necessity of empathy, not necessarily sympathy, but empathy, in order to understand, not necessarily to explain, but to understand what is going on in this country. So now, having been able to read Serbo-Croatian, it was much more easier for me in the end to function as a judge in the context of Bosnia-Herzegovina, in the context of the successor states of former Yugoslavia. And I became aware of the underlying problems which they did not talk themselves about openly. So you need also the capacity to read between the lines, so to speak. And geopolitics will not teach you to read between the lines, because geopolitics is not a science, but an ideology, to come back to that, which is based on a certain theory in international relations called neorealism in international relations, where each and everything is reduced to the simple idea of national interest. What matters? It's national interest. This was not invented in China, by the way. It was invented by the US. In the US after World War II, this neorealist approach by Hans Morgenthau and John Mearsheimer is one of the most prominent exponents and advocates of this neorealist approach in the United States to this very day. And in this respect, I think we have really to take care of, not to fall into the trap of such an ideology of, like it is with geopolitics, but also to learn to read between the lines. And this will be able and possible only through the approach of intercultural communication and intercultural dialogue. So what you read here is simply translated into English as China. The Chinese name for, or in the language, Zhongguo, the country, the middle country, the middle kingdom, or however this is translated in the end, into English and into the German language. Next slide, please. So this is the territory of today's China, where you can see already, yeah, this is a big territory. And of course, when we talk about countries, about states, we always talk about territories, firstly. Secondly, people who lives there on this territory. And thirdly, how is this territory organized, institutionally organized in political terms? And nowadays, we have a big discussion, not only in China, but also in the so-called West. Yeah, is China a several thousand-year-old civilization, or is China a nation state? So what you can see here on the next slide is, of course, well, it looks like a nation state like all the others, with the political and administrative structure of all these provinces, and you can no longer see the green lines here perfectly well on this slide. Again, subdivided into autonomous regions, like the Tibetan region here, or Xinjiang, the Uyghur region, but also in the northeast, the Manchu regions. So again, the question is, when we speak about Tibetans, Uyghurs, Manchu, where are the Han? Because this is one of the basic ideas to say, well, Chinese civilizations over 3,000 years, or even more than 3,000 years, is a Han Chinese civilization. Next slide, please. And when you see here into the political system of the People's Republic of China, you'll see the identity of party organization and state organization without going into the details here. So this is, again, one of the most important principles, that you have a party state since 1949, when Mao Zedong and the armies, the Red Armies, took over the political control, the military control over what is today called mainland China, and the Kuomintang party under Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island of Taiwan. Next slide. So again, what is China all about? How shall we conceive China and Europe? And I take over, therefore, as one of the major methodological ideas for intercultural communication, this phrase of two-way mirrors. We look into China, the Chinese look into Europe, but what do we see? So one is always reflected in the other picture. This is the basic idea which I take over from a professor of comparative literature and translational sciences, Eugene A.O. Young, who gave this idea a book title, The Two-Way Mirrors. And in the end, as you can see, already in the end of the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the breakdown of the communist regimes in Eastern Europe, the Harvard political scientist Samuel Huntington published a book on the clash of civilizations. So China is a civilization, but according to Huntington, who wrote also another book about the US, also the West and Western civilization are in confrontation with each other. What is the most important message here is, in Huntington books, is that there is no notion like humankind. Humanity doesn't exist. Humanity is a utopian idea. What we have in political reality is civilizations. And how does he define civilizations? Along the lines of world religions. So you have Christianity, again, subdivided into Catholicism and Protestantism, making up Western civilization. You have Russia with orthodoxy as a civilization of its own. And of course, Han and Han Chinese. China is also one of the major civilizations for Huntington. And finally, Islam. And he makes a look into the future and says, in the end, there will be a third world war. The rest against the West, in particular Islam versus the West. So he is of the opinion that cultural and ethnic and religious differences are the root causes of conflict, which must, by definition, end up in war. This is the message. And geopolitics is, of course, one form of this approach of conflict theories. The next slide, please. And as you can see here, thanks to the invitation by the Confucius Institute in Graz, in 2019, several painters came from China to Graz. And you can see here me together with one of the painters, and he painted a calligraphy for me, which reads in translation here, in Pinyin translation, Tianren He. Again, translated then into English. I think this is the basic message also from the epistemological point of view, the basic message, heaven and man are one. They form a unity, so that there is a common humankind. Chinese civilization is based on this idea. And therefore, I see what is now for me, basically, because I also tried now to learn Chinese. Xenia is my teacher in the Chinese language for some time already. And I like, as a personal hobby, landscape painting. And therefore also Chinese painting are my hobby, by the way, and I even collect Chinese paintings by now. And for me, therefore, Chinese civilization is best explained with two basic elements. First of all, the script. Next slide, please. And what you see here in the eastern part of China, all the provinces adjacent to the so-called East China Sea, these are the excavations from the centuries 1000 before Christ, where you see the territory of what we call today China was much smaller than it is today. Next slide, please. And here are the first examples from these excavations for Chinese script developed on bronze vessels already 700 years before Christ. Next slide. And then you have so-called ox bones, where you see the first, again, Chinese characteristics, almost 3,000 years old, as you can see here. Next slide, also the bamboo strips, again, used as a material for writing. Next slide. And here you see that the Chinese script is based on what is called pictograms, so that the visual impression is translated into scriptures. You see Shan for mountain, and Shui for water. And if you combine Shan Shui, then you have the word what we call today landscape. So landscape painting in Chinese is simply Shanshui, whereas in Croatian, for instance, in the Croatian language, it is called pejzaž. And you immediately recognize that this is not an original Croatian word, but taken over from French, paysage. So Shanshui, paysage, always used also in the terminology for painting. And so you can see also the script for a man, not in the gender perspective, Ren, in combination with tree, Mu can also in combination mean a word, and Ming again as a combination of sun and moon, and so on. Next slide, please. And this is now again here already a stele, a stone stele in an old city of ancient China, in Xi'an, the capital city. And you can see here again, this is the most important script of the imperial court, Kaishu, which was used by the civil servants. And this is what you are, for more than 2,000 years now, 2,000 years now, you have to learn when you study Chinese. Next slide, please. And this is again from the year 800 on the mountain Tai, one of the holy mountains, according to Taoism, in China, where you can see also here the Chinese characters in stone. Next slide, please. And of course, what is also very important is what we call the Silk Road. The Silk Road, again, is not an invention by Xi Jinping, but is indeed an ancient Silk Road. You see that Peter Frankopan, a historian in Oxford, has written a 1,500 pages volume on the development of the Silk Roads since ancient times until today. And in the next slide, you can see then finally religious movements and the spread of religions here into Europe from the Middle East. So in particular, Christianity, but also Islam, and from today's India and the Himalaya region, then the spread of Buddhism, first into the south of India and to Vietnam and today's Cambodia, back into China, but again over the Silk Road, also from the northeast route into China. So that Buddhism came to China already in the 14th century CE. So this is basically also a question, what is the role of religion? How do we conceive religion? And the next slide, please, before we try to discuss this, is also now a comparison from one of the art books on Eastern Asian art, that you see all the dynasties from 1000 before Christ to the People's Republic on the one hand, and the painters and the most important painters from the times of these dynasties, and at the right-hand side of the slide, events in Europe. So you start with Pompeii, the volcano in Pompeii at the very time of the beginning of the first empire under the Qin dynasty. Then you see the following dynasties, the Han dynasty and the Tang dynasty and so on. And you see also here the Emperor Constantine with the Codex Justinianus, not done to forget 200 years later, the fall of Rome, the rule of Charles the Great, Charlemagne, the Norman conquest of Britain, the fall of Constantinople, and so on and so forth. So again, you see, well, what makes the difference? Is this simply a parallel history? What are the commonalities and what are the differences? And from the perspective of art history and what interests me most, Giotto, mentioned here with his death date of 1337, is according to official art history, the first landscape painter in Europe. And when you look into the Chinese history of landscape painting, you'll see that you will have landscape painting more than 1,000 years before Giotto on different materials. The next slide, please. So, civilization. And then you have a book, as you can see here, published some 10 years ago by Bill Hayton, who says, forget all these ideas about Chinese civilization, 3,000 years old. This is a fake story. Each and everything in China has been invented by intellectuals turned politicians in the 19th century. China was invented. There is no such thing as China. When you think of Han, Mongol, Manchu, Hui population, what else? Sovereignty. What is sovereignty? The very term sovereignty did not exist in Chinese language until the 20th century. The Han race is again an invention, as I said before. The Chinese nation, there was never something like a nation in China. It was a multi-ethnic Qing dynasty dating from the 17th century to the end, to this end of monarchy in 1912, with the establishment of the Republic in 1912. As a nation state is again an invention. The Qing dynasty was a multi-ethnic empire composed of the 5 great people. And by the way, the Manchu were not Han Chinese. Yeah? They were a people or a nation of their own. So that China didn't exist. The Yuan dynasty is a sinicized name for the Mongol invasion, yeah, and the takeover of the Chinese territory by the Mongols, and of course also the Qing dynasty is a foreign invasion by the Manchus and the takeover by the Manchus. So the Chinese language, what about the Chinese language? Is there a Chinese language? I must say I have a lot of difficulties, yeah, when I try to speak a few words only in Shanghai or in Hong Kong. Whenever I try to pronounce these terms, they will simply not understand me. There are at least 12 different languages which are not mutually comprehensible in China. There is one script everybody can read, the Kaishu script, and will understand. But if you pronounce these characters, they will not understand each other. This is not my opinion, so this is what Mr. Hayton writes, and what is, of course, also my personal experience to some extent. And of course, when we talk about Taiwan, does the island of Taiwan belong to China, yes or no? Again, this can be contested, yeah, from a historic perspective, and the ideas of geographers, whether Taiwan belongs to China or not. Next slide, please. So we have these 2 lenses, which I talked about already at the very beginning, and we can go to the next slide. So already this was mentioned, geopolitics is based on the idea of conflict leading to war. And by the way, in my opinion, this is a dangerous ideology because this is more or less a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you believe in the ideology of geopolitics, and for some decades now, for 2 decades now, with the publication of this book here, there is a lot of discussion about the Thucydides trap. Thucydides was a Greek historian who wrote about the Peloponnese War. And his main message is, as you have learned already in legal history, in the field of legal history or in high school, you have 2 rival powers among the Greek city-states, Athens and Sparta. And as soon as one of the 2 rival powers tries to become stronger and stronger and stronger, the other one will be afraid that they strive for hegemony. And therefore, they start arms races. And in the end, the mutual arms races will end up in a war. This is the message. You cannot escape. And the Thucydides trap is only a phrase, therefore, when you look into history for more than 2,000 years now, you have 12 examples of 2 rival powers claiming or not really openly claiming for hegemony. And in these most examples, only in twice, the Thucydides trap did not function. No war came out of this conflict and the competition. But in all the others, in 90%, competition will lead to war. This is the message of the Thucydides trap. And now the big questions for the last 25 years is now, are the US and the US and China also trapped in the Thucydides trap? Next slide, please. So, and this is the challenge for globalization with the Belt and Road Initiative. And here you see again the waterways for the Belt and Road Initiative and the land routes for the Belt and Road Initiative. And if you compare them, what Peter Frankopan presents as maps for 500 after Christ, it's exactly the same. You have exactly the same routes, water routes as well as land routes. Next slide. And behind these Thucydides traps is, in terms of geopolitics, another notion which goes back to the invention of the very term geopolitics by Halford Mackinder before World War I, who argued that who is in possession of what he calls the heartland or the pivot area will rule the world. So the possession of this territory, which is basically Siberia, makes you the ruler of the world. This was heavily discussed before World War I and after World War I, and then we go on with the history of this theory after World War I in the next slide. You will again see here the idea which was developed under the Nazi regime, that you have the big powers here, and the yellow area is not China, but Japan. The Nazis thought that Japan is the big power in Asia, in Eastern Asia, and therefore they tried, of course, as you all know from your history courses, they allied with Nazi Germany before and after World War II, and in particular also Japan was an imperialistic country before World War II, occupying the Manchu area of China and a little bit more. So the next slide. Nicholas Spikeman's theory is a little bit different from Mackinder's theory. And he says, no, it's not this heartland, but he calls it the rimland. And the rimland is basically the geographic periphery of the former heartlands of Mackinder. And who rules this rimland, which is here in black gray, will rule the world. And as you can see here, most of these territories, in particular between Africa and Europe, are today the areas where we have wars today. So this is the next development in the yeah. Yeah.
It's not obvious as to why one should move just because you are in certain
Yeah. We have already heard about the theories of colonialism and imperialism. And in this respect, Portugal and Spain, but also the Netherlands, did no longer rule the world, the known world. Yeah, we start with Columbus and the discoveries by Columbus, and then by the Portuguese and the Spanish, and finally the British taking over India. And the idea behind this that in particular between for Portuguese, Spanish, and English, British colonialism and imperialism is free trade. We want to enforce free trade and to be able to occupy, and if these countries do not follow the idea of free trade and resist free trade, we must open their ports. So this is the idea that first in the 19th century, a maritime power is ruling the world. Great Britain is ruling the world, yeah, because of free trade. So this is the very first idea, yeah, of how to rule power. And of course, by the end of the 19th century and at the beginning of the centuries, in particular in Germany, in competition with Great Britain, then the idea came, well, we need, due to the demographic developments, we need more land territory for our people to be able to survive. So this, what is the German term, then invented by the German geographers at the beginning of the 20th century, yeah, we need Lebensraum. And this was exactly the phrase used then by the Nazis, starting the war against the Soviet Union. Insofar, yeah, these two ideas come together. Who is able to control all sea routes is a world power. And the idea, yeah, from racism, developed from racism, we need for the survival of our own people more territory, Lebensraum. These two come together to say, well, we fight in the end, yeah, for the control of the world. And of course, then after World War II, before World War II, of course, but in particular after World War II with the two world wars, this was seen as a global conflict between two ideologies, communism on the one hand and liberalism on the other hand. And of course, when you look into the expressions of communist leaders, not beginning with Marx, but at the latest with Lenin, they will say, well, communism will give all mankind a new status. So like in the French Revolution, that the French are trying to liberate all people so that you have a humankind. So also the communist leaders did believe in this utopia of a world power based on the idea of a humankind to be created by socioeconomic changes and by political revolutions. So you had these, of course, even as military doctrines under Mao Zedong, insofar that it is necessary to occupy. Already Hitler had the idea, Nazis will finally rule the entire world, not only in Europe. And in this respect, you have always this, for you, strange idea, why do you want to rule the entire world? And this is, of course, now again, the idea in geopolitics, that a strong world power, China, becoming more and more aggressive in international relations terms, is again striving for world power. And this is again the basic claim behind the Thucydides trap, therefore. Okay, next slide. And finally, when you combine these two ideas, you have this map where basically we see that Eurasia is seen as the territory, the land mass, so to speak, to be controlled for ruling the world. Next slide. So we always talk about Taiwan, but already 20 years ago, this book again was published as Asia's Cauldron in the South China Sea. And when you can see the next slide, you see why. Already in 1936, a Chinese geographer made a claim that this tongue, which is the form here of the red line, in the East China Sea belongs to China. So that China claims sovereignty over all these tiny, tiny islands and rifts in the South China Sea, which are called the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, close to the Philippines, and so on. And therefore, you can see that also China was starting, so to speak, again, an arms race over the last 20 years in order also to control the East China Sea. And why is this control over the East China Sea so important? Because you have the so-called Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia, very, very small channel, and 75% of the ships coming from the East China Sea, bringing goods, or in particular oil, from East Asia to Europe, have to cross this Malacca Strait. So this is the most strategically important problem here, also for the lines of transport. Next, please. Well, this is not China. As you can see, this is Leipzig, 1989. And we see here the phrase, Germans, we are the people, in terms, we are the sovereign, not the Communist Party of the German Democratic Republic. And we are not only that people, we are one united people, when I translate here the German phrase into English. So one people united by the same language. This is, of course, 300 years old German philosophy from Herder over Schlegel and Fichte, that a people is defined by a common language, and that also the people speaking one language has a right to its own state. This is the very first idea of an ethnic nation state, which comes to the fore also in the German Revolution in 1989. Next slide, please. And this is again 1989. Demonstrations at the Tiananmen place in Beijing under the rule of Deng Xiaoping. Next slide. And this is a united people. I leave this question open. I do not answer this question because you all know what happens afterwards. Yeah? What is the end of these demonstrations on the Tiananmen Square? Next slide. And what is now in terms of geopolitics? Yeah, one of the discussions now, the development from quantity to quality, that China is now a leading power also in the development of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is very important, yeah, to make better use of computers, but the better use of computers can also be used for the control of communication. And this is, as you can see here from the American Freedom House agency, overview, how does internet control in China work? And one of my Swiss colleagues from the University of Fribourg in Switzerland already some 10 years ago told me when he crossed a street in Beijing, despite of a red light, yeah, all of a sudden from a loudspeaker, he heard his name, "Stop, go back. You are not allowed to cross the street." So they have, so it is already possible to have a full, perfect visual control of what is going on. Yeah, and by the way, don't worry. If you travel through a tunnel here in Austria, it's pretty much the same. Yeah. So this is not a speciality of China, of course. Yeah, that you could be identified immediately. Yeah, personally. Next slide. And therefore, again, I think what is maybe to be seen in diversity from the ideas of the great unity and harmony is, well, is Europe also based on the idea of unity and harmony in terms of uniformity? This is the big question also for the cultural and political developments, not only in China, but even the more so in Europe. And I come therefore to my last two slides. Taking over the two-way mirrors phrase, what we talk about throughout the entire lecture series is history to be understood, yeah, as a combination of continuity, but also possibly disruption. And how do we interpret the so-called progress of history, modernity? What is the meaning of modernity for Europeans? What is the meaning of modernization, yeah, in Chinese intellectual debates among different academic disciplines? When we talk about cultural traditions, we have not only Confucianism and Christianity, but also to take into account Buddhism or Taoism. when we talk about ideologies, we have to see that in Europe, at least since the 19th century, all our thinking is based on the three ideologies of liberalism, nationalism, socialism, communism. Is this different in China? Of course not, as we will learn. That the Chinese Communist Party has taken over Marxism, Leninism, and then further developed, as we will see in a moment. And of course, in terms of political power, we have always to see concentration of political power in one hand, in one institution, or the idea of pluralism, and therefore the question of the legitimation of power. How do we justify the exercise of power? Next slide. So this is again for the use, and of course this will be based, this PowerPoint presentation can be downloaded from the Moodle platform. But again, here on the left-hand side, you will see again the most important dynasties until 1911 to the Xinhai Revolution, and then the First Republic with Sun Yat-sen, the foundation of the Communist Party of China, which was, by the way, founded in Paris, not in Beijing or Shanghai. And on the other side, the Kuomintang party under Chiang Kai-shek, who saw himself as a successor to Sun Yat-sen. And of course, then you have, between the two world wars, the conflict, also the violent conflict between warlords, because after the Xinhai Revolution and the establishment of the Republic, the territory of the Qing dynasty completely broke up, like the Soviet Union, into different smaller territories controlled by what we call warlords. And at the same time, the import, the transplantation of all these so-called Western ideas of liberalism, nationalism, and communism into China, and strong ideological debates within intellectual circles. And finally, the organization of two mass parties, the Kuomintang and the KPG, which ended up in 1949 with the military victory of the Communist Party under Mao Zedong. And Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang retreating to Taiwan. So Mao first took over the Soviet model of organization, was under the influence first of Stalin and the Stalinist model of political organization, and more developed what is then called Maoism as a new model, or what is today called a socialist market economy, as Dr. Jen before called it, with Chinese characteristics. And of course, after the collapse, after the death of Mao and the arrest of the gang, so-called Gang of Four, who ruled in the spirit of Mao, Deng Xiaoping took over the control of the Communist Party and established what he calls a collective leadership. And of course, the question is, with the opening and liberalization and marketization, which started under Deng Xiaoping in 1982, well, is it communism any longer? No, in the traditional sense. But what is it? Is it socialism, or is it pragmatism? Also, you can read this assessment in several academic articles. And finally, Xi Jinping calls it the Zhongguo Meng, the Chinese dream. But what is the Chinese dream? This is the big question. And I will not go now through so-called Western history on the right side of the PowerPoint slide, but come really to the end, to the final slide, to the last slide. When we again discuss within this lecture series the different topics. We deal with political theory, international relations, and of course, the historic interpretation of events in terms of different political theories and approaches in the international relations. What I think can give you an analytical framework for further discussions is to see that all our thinking, and this is my hypothesis, not my message, but my hypothesis, and in some way also a research program for our Department of Global Governance for the future here at Graz University within the law school, is that we have to distinguish epistemology from ontology and realism. And that my hypothesis is based on the idea that there is no difference between China and the West in epistemological terms. You see, Greek ancient philosophy was based on the categorical distinction between Greeks and barbarians. But this is the same in China. Yi and Xia, always the fight against the barbarians on the northern borders and the northwestern borders, the Mongols, for instance. However, what we see, not only in terms of a distinction between external and internal exercise of power, is the difference really between worldliness, what I call worldliness, in German, diesseitiges Denken, from transcendentalism and religious thinking. And this is exactly what you not find in China, according to academic literature. But the phrase Jiaguo Tianxia, Tianxia, everything under heaven. There is no afterlife, yeah, where we wait for the salvation of our souls, yeah. There will be no last final judgment by a personal God, and we go either to heaven or to hell. This does not exist. And Chinese scholars say this is a specificity of Christianity and monotheistic religions like Islam, a strict separation between this world on the one hand and salvation in the afterlife, so that also our thinking in terms of time is a linear thinking towards an end state where we will find salvation. This is, if this is true, completely alien to Chinese thinking based on Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and of course also legalism as one of the main approaches already in ancient China. So that it is very difficult, by the way, to conceptualize the term law. What is the meaning of law? Therefore, Fa, as you can see here for China, could be translated in criminal law, sanctions. The emperor and the mandarins, the civil service of the emperor, impose sanctions for wrong behavior. But is this our meaning of law? Therefore, quotation marks. Whereas Confucians say we do not need law. Everything we need is the gentleman, Junzi, a gentleman, a cultivated emperor and a cultivated people working together under the notion of Li. Whereas the hierarchy of norms as we call it in the Stufenbau der Rechtsordnung in German, is again different. You have party norms, Luxian, Fangjian, Zhengzi, which means basic ideas. The most important contradiction in reality, and on the basis of the great line of or strategy of approach to be taken in light of the analysis of the most important contradiction, the Communist Party will draw conclusions and give political guidelines, Zhengzi. And they have priority over all positive law, according to the Chinese constitution and the laws made by the parliament. And finally, to come to an end, what is the meaning of a nation? Again, you see, Minzu is a translation taken over from a Japanese translation of the German term nation. So this is the history of translation, yeah. But again, Han people, Manchus, Tibetans, is the meaning of nation when Xi Jinping calls the necessity of a strong Chinese nation a multi-ethnic empire, or does it follow the idea of what we call in German only Staatsvolk, and which is hardly translatable even into English as state nation? But what is for sure is Da Yidong, what must be resolved under all circumstances in light of historic events. The breakdown of the Russian, Ottoman, and Habsburg empires after World War I, the breakdown of the Soviet Union. Never again is the message by the Communist Party. Da Yidong must be preserved, the great unity in terms of territorial integrity, and secondly, also of the cultural uniformity of the people. And as you can see here on the west side here, this is a little bit different from what I have tried to develop in my own book on human and minority rights by multiple diversity governance, published by Routledge in 2019, as the European concepts of state nations and nation states, and my critique against the European history and development of the combinations of state and nation. But I think that during the course of our lecture series, these are the main issues, the main topics with which we will have the opportunity to discuss with our colleagues, either from University of Graz or from abroad. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you look into the Moodle device, then the Austrian Ministry of Defense has just published a book on China, 300 pages, and I really can ask you, please read this book very carefully in preparation also for the formal discussions with our colleagues. It is one of the most interesting books I have read over the last couple of years. And by the way, it's also written in German. So it's much easier to and quicker to read. Thank you so much. And sorry that I did not leave any time for questions, but I will also join the next sessions, and I hope that we will really have then more time also for discussions with this background as an analytical framework, hopefully. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Markov. Thank you, everyone. We're a little bit off the time. Any questions for now? No. You gotta rest. Okay, so take your time, rest. Everything is in Moodle. you will find the video. Most likely you will always find the videos, our lectures in Moodle. I'll also try to make sure that we have the presentations as well there. If there are some suggestions to read as well, will be there. Yeah, otherwise just contact us if you have any questions, and enjoy the semester. Yep, bye.